The back is upright, but not rigid. We relax into this seated posture. And when you feel comfortable, if you wish to do so, you could allow your eyes to close gently. Otherwise, just let your gaze be soft. Perhaps in front of you, slightly lowered. And we sit without expectation. We are here, and that is all. We let go of desire and anticipation. Just allowing ourselves to enjoy some calm, centered time. And let's gently bring our awareness to our feet. Just noticing any sensations there. And bringing our awareness to our hands. Noticing the hands resting gently wherever they would like to be. And if we notice effort in the hands, just seeing if we can relax and let that go. And soften and relax the shoulders. Bring our awareness to the mouth and jaw area, softening and relaxing, bringing spaciousness into the mouth and jaw. And perhaps starting to notice that as the body relaxes, the mind relaxes. And you're invited to take a few deep breaths together, just to further in this relaxation. Breathing in and breathing out, a nice long exhale. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, and breathing out. And we just return to a natural breath. Just with a gentle relaxation. And let's bring our awareness to the very top of the head. And just notice relaxation coming down from the top of the head, over our face, down past our ears and the back of the head. And the relaxation comes to the shoulders and then down the shoulders, along the upper arms and down to the hands, and then relaxation goes right to the tips of the fingers and even past the tips of the fingers. And then we bring our awareness back to our relaxed shoulders, and relaxation travels down the soft front of the body, the chest, and the abdomen. Relaxation travels down the hard back of the body, the upper back and the lower back. Relaxation comes into the hips, bringing spaciousness with it. And the relaxation continues down the legs, past the knees, and into the feet. And relaxation continues along the toes, right to the tips of the toes, and even past them. And if it feels comfortable for you to do so, let's gently shift our awareness to a spot above the navel, in the center of our bodies. And we gently allow the awareness to rest here. And this is with the gentleness of a flower moving gently in the breeze, the gentleness of a feather falling on the surface of the water. And when the mind wanders, we see if we can let go of whatever's taken it away and come on back to gently rest our awareness at the center. If thoughts come, we let them pass by as if they were birds. We don't reach out to stop them or to talk with them. We simply let them pass. If you're finding that resting your awareness at the center is not relaxing for you, you could shift to resting your awareness on the sensations of your breath or your hands. We wish to remain relaxed. And if we notice that the mind is very active today, we may wish to pop up an image, a visualization to rest our awareness on. Perhaps a lotus flower, the moon, or the sun. Perhaps a lovely orange. And just gently resting the awareness on the image and coming back to it when the mind wanders. We may also wish to use the mantra. Samma Araham. Samma Araham. Samma Araham. We maintain a calm, gentle, relaxed feeling. Keeping our relaxation and our alertness in balance. If we're finding ourselves too relaxed, perhaps beginning to feel drowsy, foggy, fuzzy, we could open our eyes gently in order to bring the relaxation and the alertness back into balance. If you're feeling very drowsy, you could stand with eyes open, gently continuing your meditation in standing position. And the more patient we are with ourselves and the process, the more relaxed the mind will be. We'll now continue to meditate in silence for a little while, adjusting contentedly along the way with self-compassion. In a few minutes, a single chime will signal the end of this formal sitting. Let's use this time to bring a sense of spaciousness and capacity to our bodies and our minds. Practicing and noticing this feeling of fullness. We are full of our awareness. Thank you for your practice. And let's just take a few moments to stretch, do anything that needs to be done. And we'll just come back in around 3 minutes. Okay, hi everybody. I think we're gonna come back and get started. Great. And if people could just give me a thumbs up if they can hear me well, that would be super helpful. Terrific. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to get started. And today's talk, I could probably talk about equanimity every week for the rest of my life. It's such a rich topic. Revisiting it again, and we're going to talk about equanimity and the nervous system. And some of this may seem familiar, but I think some of the emphases have changed a little bit. So we'll have to see. So I'd like to start off with this quote from Margaret Cullen. She's an author, she's an MBSR teacher and a therapist. And she says, the essence of equanimity is the ability to care without either attachment or detachment. And I continue to be drawn to this statement. And I think it's because care is in the center of it. When it comes to equanimity, sometimes we can default to something a little closer to indifference in order to wrestle with the messiness of trying to be equanimous about unpleasant and pleasant experiences, undesirable and desirable experiences. So we can sort of, I think, take a little shortcut into detachment and indifference. And I really appreciate that caring is at the center of this statement. So when we consider the word equanimity, the first word that often comes to mind, even for people who are not studying the Dharma or are new to it, is the word balance. And this is not a purely mathematical balance. It's not about an equality of quantity on either side of a fulcrum, It's about a balance that is a balance of wisdom. It's a wisdom that comes from the understanding about the way things are, the nature of things. Nothing is permanent. We are not in control. Things happen, and sometimes things hurt. And it's also the wisdom that knows if we do not understand the true nature of things deeply within us, we will suffer with reactivity, with clinging and aversion, grasping and pushing away, and will probably spread this suffering to others. So equanimity is the fourth of the Brahma Viharas. Brahma can be translated as supreme, divine, or best. And Vihara means a dwelling place, an abode. So the Brahma Viharas are four qualities, which taken together form our best home. The first of the Brahma Viharas is, in Pali, the language of the historical Buddha, metta. This translates closely into loving kindness. Some translate it as friendliness, and it involves the deep knowing of connection between all beings. Karuna, or compassion, is a profound sensitivity. It's been described as the trembling or quivering of our hearts when we see the suffering of others. Mudita, or sympathetic joy, involves taking delight in the success and good fortune of others, free from competition and ego. And then we come to upekkha, equanimity. Equanimity is a balance born of wisdom about the way things are. We want to practice and experience connection, sensitivity, celebration in our interactions with ourselves and others. And it's with this deep knowing of how things are, which equanimity provides, its spaciousness and balance, that we can do so free of reactivity, clinging, and aversion. Pema Chodron said, there's enough space in your own being, enough space in the whole of creation to accommodate all of it, all of it. It's because we pick and choose, because we have biases and prejudices, because we prefer smooth to rough, and then react for and against, that we suffer. So as we continue with our talk today, let's just keep this idea of capacity in mind. Chodron is talking about our capacity to hold it all, as she says, all of it. So let's revisit the Buddha's description of the balancing act we're engaged with here. According to the Buddha, there are four worldly conditions in four pairs of opposites: gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain. If we place these on a balance, we can see and maybe even feel in our bodies the challenge to develop and maintain equanimity about them. At times, particularly if we're run down, under a great stress, sound familiar, anyone? It may seem ludicrous to try to approach these conditions with balance. How can we not want to hold on to the desirable conditions and push away the undesirable? The problem lies with our fantasy that if we play our cards right, we can beat the system. We can rid our lives of undesirable conditions. Let's keep in mind that the Buddha did not say we should enjoy loss as much as we enjoy gain. He didn't say we shouldn't notice that some experiences are more pleasant than others. In fact, part of equanimity is noticing the feeling tone, or Vedana, of every experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. but to accept it, to not automatically move toward the pleasant and away from the unpleasant, to be with both, with the acceptance that comes with the wise understanding that these 8 worldly conditions all exist in life, that the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral all exist in life. That if you experience the undesirable or unpleasant, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It means that you're alive. I think Jack Kornfield put it nicely. True equanimity is a balanced engagement with all aspects of life. It is opening to the whole of life without composure and with ease of mind, accepting the beautiful and terrifying nature of all things. Equanimity embraces the loved and the unloved, the agreeable and the disagreeable, the pleasure and the pain. It eliminates clinging and aversion. So ever since learning about the Brahma Viharas and equanimity in particular, I've been considering it. I've practiced mindfulness on the cushion and on and off it over time. I've noticed a shift. I've noticed that when I misplace my keys or spill something, I'm more likely to laugh while I look for them, laugh as I clean it up, much more than I used to be. There was a time when either of these everyday occurrences would send me into a tirade of self-recrimination, and sometimes there would be some degree of panic. And when it comes to more serious matters, like messing up at work, I find that I'm much more forgiving with myself. I'm also not so quick to attack myself, opting for self-compassion instead. So through the Buddhist lens alone, I could see myself as experiencing greater equanimity. I can see that I'm more accepting of the variety of life's experiences, the pleasant, the unpleasant, and the neutral. I find myself more and more moving out of reactivity and into calm response. I'm less likely to attack myself and others, less likely to run, more likely to stay engaged with my experience. And these realizations began to remind me of something I was studying alongside Buddhist teachings. They began to remind me of things I was learning about neuroscience and the nervous system. I sensed intuitively at first that my reactivity and calm acceptance of what is could be understood in terms of the nervous system, as well as the teachings. And mindfulness practice seems to be where they overlap. So let's look at one small aspect of the intersection of the Buddhist teachings and the nervous system. And speaking of practice, let's just do a brief mindfulness practice before we talk about the nervous system. So I'm going to assume that people are seated. So let's just start by getting big. Let's notice the space we're occupying as we sit here. Let's notice that there's expansion when we inhale and relaxation when we exhale. And as we move, let's notice our bodies moving into the space around us. So let's just move our arms through space above the head as we inhale. And just noticing this expansiveness, and exhale as the arms come down. And we'll just do another one. Inhaling up and exhaling down. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to start off by looking at one small aspect of the intersection with the nervous system. And this is a brief sketch of a part of our nervous system, which is called the autonomic nervous system, and it functions without conscious effort. It controls things like breathing, perspiring, digesting, that sort of thing. It's got two parts: the sympathetic nervous system, which is like the accelerator in a car, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake. These systems reside in the oldest part of the brain, referred to as the reptilian brain. They've evolved over time to protect us from threat and to ensure our survival. So when we encounter a challenge or a threat, and guess what? Our nervous system doesn't always know the difference between them. The sympathetic nervous system revs up like the accelerator pedal in a car. We're in go mode. We call this heightened arousal. If we're too highly aroused, we may go into fight or flight. And when the challenge or threat has passed, the parasympathetic nervous system puts the brakes on, returns us to a rest state. We slow and sometimes stop. We call this lowered arousal. And if our arousal goes too low, we may go into freeze. So let's look at what's happening in our day-to-day lives. So our experiences trigger ups and downs in our level of arousal. These ups and downs are represented by this purple wavy line. When we need to act, our sympathetic nervous system is engaged. It's as if we're pushing our foot on the accelerator. There are chemical changes that take place in our brains and our bodies, depending on our level of arousal. When we're in go mode, our body releases the hormones cortisol and adrenaline. We perspire. Our breath and our pulse rate may change as well. When the need to act passes, the parasympathetic nervous system engages like a brake pedal and brings us back to rest. Our arousal level drops. Big energy experiences, good or bad, spike arousal. The system doesn't distinguish. Depending on the circumstances, big energy experiences might be a wedding or losing one's job, or they might be misplacing your keys or spilling that cup of coffee. So what's the tie-in with equanimity? This introduces us to the window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance was coined by Dr. Dan Siegel, familiar to some of you. He's an author as well as being a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA. It refers to a window each of us has within which we can tolerate the variation in arousal levels. By tolerate, we mean that within the window, we maintain groundedness, openness, curiosity, and flexibility. Sounds an awful lot like the characteristics we might associate with equanimity. When we exist within this window, we're able to learn effectively, play, and relate to ourselves and others. However, if we move outside of our window, we can become hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, going into fight, flight, or freeze. People's windows of tolerance can be different widths. What we're looking at is what we might call a typical window of tolerance. Though most of the ups and downs in arousal, this person is maintaining groundedness, openness, curiosity, and flexibility. Some of us have a little more challenge in this regard. This is what a narrow window of tolerance might look like. As you can see, the same arousal levels are now outside the window. So what determines the width of your window of tolerance? Well, several things. Genetics play a role. We're learning more and more about that through epigenetic studies. What's happening now, particularly if there are long-term chronic stressors, like what we are experiencing now because of the pandemic, can temporarily narrow our window. And importantly, what was happening in our homes in our early years can be very impactful, particularly if you experienced what are known as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. So we're going to take a little side trip and just introduce this concept of ACEs. So the ACEs study was conducted by the CDC and Kaiser Health between 1995 and 1997. What they did was they surveyed 17,000 mostly white, middle and upper middle class, college-educated San Diegans with good jobs and great healthcare. They all belong to the Kaiser Permanente HMO. Participants were asked to answer 10 questions, which asked them if they had experienced any of 10 identified adverse childhood experiences before their 18th birthdays. The questions fell under the headings of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, and spanned from physical abuse to emotional neglect to substance abuse in the household. The number of questions has been expanded by some local organizations, by the way. And on the right here, we see that in Philadelphia, 5 extra questions on 5 topics have been added. The study then compared the outcomes of the survey with health outcomes for the participants, and they had certain findings. As your ACE score increases, so the number of yeses in the survey, so does your risk of disease, social and emotional problems. If you want to take the ACE test, by the way, you can just Google NPR, National Public Radio, and ACE test, and they have it online. So with an ACE score of 4 or more, things may be starting to get serious. The likelihood of chronic pulmonary lung disease increases 390%, hepatitis 240%, depression 460%, and attempted suicide 1,220%. So one would expect a person with an ACE score of 4 or more to have a more narrow window of tolerance. Something like this. And let's note again, how many of the instances of heightened arousal take this person out of the window of tolerance, leaving a place of groundedness, openness, curiosity, and flexibility. Now, lest you be growing concerned, I will skip to the great news for us. Another variable that can have a very strong effect on the width of your window of tolerance is mindfulness practice. A regular mindfulness practice, including any combination of on and off the cushion practices, static and dynamic, so sitting or moving, can widen the window of tolerance. And again, going back to the language of equanimity, that sounds a lot like building our capacity to hold it all that life gives us. So let's look briefly at what happens when we move outside the window of tolerance. So when we go outside the window in the direction of too much arousal, called hyperarousal, we may find ourselves in fight and flight. This is characterized by anxiety, overwhelm, and then a two-sided coin, hypervigilance on one side and chaos on the other. Some are prone to one or the other, and some switch back and forth between them. When we go outside the window in the direction of too little arousal, called hypoarousal, we may find ourselves in freeze, characterized by shutdown, numbness, passivity, and there can be shame associated with this. In addition to variations in the width of the window of tolerance, we also have different tendencies. Tendencies are also influenced by genetics and early experiences. Here we see a tendency toward fight and flight. Here we see a tendency toward freeze. So let's bring it all back to the language of equanimity. If within the window, we meet life's events and challenges with groundedness, openness, curiosity, and flexibility, even when they include loss, disrepute, blame, pain, when they're unpleasant, when life's experiences hurt. We do not fly into the reactivity of fight or flight. We do not disengage into indifference or even into the mental and emotional paralysis of freeze. We remain engaged. We still care. We are equanimous. So let's look at this very wide window of tolerance. Note that all arousal levels are contained within the window. Is aiming for this level of balance realistic? Is it aspirational? What we're looking at is what the window of tolerance for a 10,000 plus hours meditator might look like. They experience neither hyperarousal nor hypoarousal, except in extreme circumstances. They do not meet life with the reactivity of fight or flight or the disengagement of freeze. They are present and responsive and meet experience with groundedness, openness, curiosity, and flexibility. And in doing so, they are meeting experience with equanimity. Pema Chodron said, to cultivate equanimity, we practice catching ourselves when we feel attraction or aversion before it hardens into grasping or negativity. My sense is that what Chodron is describing here is when we notice that we are starting to get toward the limits of our window of tolerance. And that's a magic moment where we can catch ourselves and stay within the window. So I wanted to leave time to give a lot of action plans, because that's something that people expressed that they were interested in. And yeah, I think we'll be okay. So action first, close-eyed meditation, bhavana. Making adjustments to our meditation practice so that we do it more often and for longer over time is going to help. Meditation is win-win. You will experience wisdom from the silent mind, and at the same time, you will widen your window of tolerance so that you spend less and less time in reactivity and disengagement, hyperarousal and hypoarousal, fight and flight, and freeze. Mindful movement, including movement in your meditation routine, not just on Saturday mornings at MMI. Studies show that when we coordinate movement, breath, and awareness, we keep the prefrontal cortex engaged and we are less likely to be reactive. So what does this look like? It's what we did before when we did the simple inhaling, bringing the arms up, and exhaling, bringing them down. Okay, we're putting three components together: an action, which was the movement of our arms, a breath, inhaling on the up and exhaling on the down, and a centering, noticing what it felt like, noticing ourselves going through space, noticing our present moment experience as we're moving. And we can use this ABC for any movement. So you can make up your own, any simple movement. Another way to widen your window of tolerance is to orient. And I've got a couple of orienting activities here, and I invite you to do them with me. I'm gonna do it myself, and I'm happy to have you join me. So what we're doing is we're orienting ourselves in the space we're in. So we'll do the first one, routine one. So we're seated. And what we're going to do is look, and if you can look over your laptop or your screen, that would be ideal. And we're going to look forward, and we're just going to notice the distance to the wall or whatever's in front of you. We're just going to take in that distance. And then we're going to look over our left shoulder. And when we twist to look over, we're going to let those hips turn, right? We want to bring the hips into it, not just for spine health, but also it has some neurological benefits. And we're going to notice how far we are from what we are looking at behind us. And just noticing that distance. And then we're going to come around and look over the right shoulder. And same thing, letting the hips twist as well and noticing the distance. And then we're going to come back and we're going to tip our gaze up and we are going to notice where the ceiling is meeting the wall in front of us. And the distance between us and that spot. And then we're going to look down, and even if it means looking with your mind's eye through some objects like your computer, we're going to notice our distance from where the wall meets the floor. Noticing that distance. And then we come back to settle. So that's one orienting routine. And then the other, which I won't take us through for time reasons, but it's simply that you start by looking up at that space, that spot where your ceiling meets your wall in front of you, and you follow the seam around the room, going to the left. And don't worry if you can't see everything because it's blocked. And don't worry if when you get to the middle, you need to turn around quickly and pick up where you left off. And you go around the whole room and you finish where you started. And the two of them together are great. I am a big fan of arrival and transition rituals. So one is, as we arrive into our day each day, how about if before we even get out of bed, we swing those legs around and sitting on the edge of the bed, we do some simple mindful movement. You could also do it while you're still lying down. Your hands inhaling and exhaling. There's all kinds of things you can do. Then I would suggest that whenever we sit down during the course of the day, when we sit down, we ground on the seat beneath us, just settling in and noticing that feeling. The third is to orient. With my students, my high school students, I suggest that when they sit down to do a test, that the first thing they do, put down the pencil, take their hands off the keyboard, and do an orienting activity just to calm themselves. Another is to just feel utensils and objects, noticing sensory experience, classic mindfulness activity. And then when we're crossing a threshold, so going in and out of a room, in and out of any space, just noticing our feet on the floor as we transition from inside a space to outside a space, noticing our hand on the doorknob or our shoulder on the door, if that's the way we're doing it these days, and just noticing the sensory experience. Another is just mindfulness in the moment. So if you notice yourself, you can feel that your arousal is taking you toward that limit where if you cross over, you might be in fight or flight. Just ground where you are, expand yourself to occupy the full space, breathe, elongating the exhales if possible, and orient if you can. And finally, I know it's a lot, open eye meditation throughout the day, just looking for opportunities to practice any of the Brahma Viharas, even for a moment each day, focusing on what is relevant to the present situation. If you're feeling a need for connection, do some metta. If you wish to practice acknowledging the suffering of others, take a moment, practice karuna. If you feel competitiveness arising within you, practice mudita. And then if you're feeling the need for balance, then practice equanimity. Upekkha. Dolly Parton said, the way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. Simple, but kind of sums it up.